Believe it or not, radishes are one of the more popular crops that market gardeners grow. Why is that? They're fast growing, they are high yielding, and they can turn a profit. More on that coming up in this video on Modern Grower. Hi growers, I'm Diego, D-I-E-G-O, and for the past 10 years, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of growers about what it takes to run a profitable market farming business. I've heard the success stories, I've heard the failure stories. I've learned a ton along the way. I've visited farms and I've seen what's working, and I've visited farms and seen what hasn't worked. My goal for this video series is to share with you what I've learned to hopefully make your journey into market farming a little bit easier if you're just starting, or maybe steer you back onto the right track if you're already a little ways down the road. Today for Finance Friday, we are talking radishes. Radishes are a common crop for market gardeners to grow, and I think that's anti-intuitive because how many of us eat radishes on a daily basis? I would be willing to bet that the percentages are pretty low, yet most gardeners or market gardeners grow them for a few reasons. One, they have a really short day to maturity. They're a high yield per linear square foot, a high price per pound. You can plant the crop over and over throughout the year, and it tends to be popular in markets. That gives it a 5 out of 5 on the CVR, which is what we're looking for. When you have limited space as a market gardener, you have to focus on the crops that pay, and they're typically fast yielding crops, and radishes are amongst the fastest yielding, if not the fastest yielding. At peak season, they could be ready in just 22 days. That's instant cash flow if you can sell them. Compare them to potatoes or corn or non-determinate tomatoes. You might be plus 100 days from planting that seed before you can get yield. With radishes, you're 20 to 35 days. Very quick. So you could plant something as early as March 1st and have it ready on April 1st for your farmer's market when it starts. That's a big advantage for a lot of farms. Quick crops that generate quick cash flow. The harvest window is relatively tight, so when they're ready, they're basically ready. Leave them in the field too long, they can split, they can get pithy, oversize. For a lot of market garden crops, we tend to err on the smaller size. We're looking at more of the baby crops versus these large things. Now, you could grow storage radishes. That's a different crop. Here, we're talking more salad radishes or snacking radishes. Typically, you're planting this with a Jang seeder, 10 rows per bed. Common varieties are French breakfast, Easter, Rover. You're going to target them around that smaller size, which is 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter. How big of a cross is that? Ping pong ball-ish size, maybe golf ball. Not much bigger. We're not growing baseballs. These aren't the big ball crops here. No elephantitis of the radish needed in the crops. We're on the little tiny balls size of things. Revenue potential is around $500 per bed, and your profit margin is around 50%. That's the number we're using for a lot of these crops. I'm willing to bet that it can actually be a lot higher. And that 50% profit margin includes you getting paid for the labor to get to that 50%. So if we sell a bed of radishes for $500, we have about $250 in costs into that. About half that $250 is our labor cost, $125. So that's $125 we have paid ourselves to raise the crop, and then we sell it for $500. We also can pocket that $250. That $250 goes back to the business. So the business owner takes in $375. The cost, if they're doing the work themselves, the labor, and then the profit off the crop. For bunch size, you're somewhere in the 14 to 16 radishes per bunch. You're going to sell a bunch of radishes for around $250, pull about 200 bunches out of each bed, That's where your $500 in revenue comes from, assuming you can sell them all. Now, pricing here can float around. I'll do a whole other video on pricing and why pricing's so tough and why it's hard to standardize that, meaning why if you're in New York and Florida and me in California, we might not charge the exact same because every market's a little different. But a lot of farmers are somewhere in the 1 for 3, 2 for 5 range, or they could be 1 for 3, they could be 1 for 4, 2 for 7, 3 for 10 is another model I've seen. So pricing can vary, but you're in that $2.50 to maybe $4 per bunch range on the radishes. Radishes are a direct seeded crop. That's where you're going to have your most advantageous cost associated with it. When you can direct seed, you don't want to transplant these if you do not have to. They're fabulous at starting themselves in the field. You shouldn't have germination issues as long as you have good quality seed. So direct seeding is beautiful for this. It is the cheapest way to get them into the ground. Transplanting, if you had to do it, it is possible, but that transplanting labor, the nursery labor, is going to add a lot of cost, and I would avoid that if you can. You definitely want to direct seed this using something like a JP1 or a JP5. You could get away with an earthway on this. It's a bigger seed. The earthway seeder does handle bigger seeds okay. Radish being on the bigger side shouldn't be a problem there. Bed prep is going to be the same as most other crops. Nothing extra special needed here in terms of the tilth of the soil or the fertility of the soil. One thing you will want to do with radishes, like all other crops, do establish a cultivation program, keeping weeds out of the bed. Now, the advantage of radishes over other crops that are long DTM crops is radishes grow really quick. So they will not only start to grow, but put up their upper canopy, shading out the bed surface, hopefully out competing weeds very quickly. And those radishes are out of the bed in 30 days. So if you did have a weed problem, it's going to be less of an issue with radishes than it would be with salad mix. So I'm not saying you should ever go lazy on your weeding, but if you had a choice between do I weed the lettuce bed or do I weed the radish bed? Weed the lettuce. Weeds will be more of an issue in the lettuce than they will be in the radish. Why is that? Again, radish is coming out of the bed quickly, so it's going to have the weeds aren't going to have a lot of time in that bed to establish themselves and get really big and really anchor themselves in with big, deep roots. So they should be easy to pull. Radishes are harvested by pulling them out of the ground. As you're pulling them out of the ground, you can do weeding at the same time. That's different than if you're harvesting salad mix where you're cutting the top off the bed. So if you have the beautiful lettuce that you want and there's all these weeds coming up amongst the radish, unless you're harvesting by hand, it's going to be very hard to select just the lettuce. If you try and run your quick cut greens harvester over the top of a weedy bed, you're going to get weeds and lettuce mixed up, and it's going to be near impossible to separate. That's why keeping weeds out of salad is critically important. We go back to radish. I'm harvesting. I'm pulling out the radish. If there's a weed next to it, that's fine. I just push that out of the way, get my radishes, and I pull the weeds and just leave them in a pile on the bed, and I come get them later. So the fast days to maturity works in your favor in terms of controlling weed pressure because we shade out the bed. The fast day to maturity works in your favor because it doesn't give weeds a chance to really get big and establish themselves. And also the way that radishes are harvested makes it easier to deal with any potential weeds in the bed. I'm always a big fan of setting up cultivation as a standard operating procedure for the whole farm because I've seen weed pressure kill farms and demoralize farmers and cost them a lot of money. But again, if push comes to shove and you only can do one thing, weed the greens beds over the root veg beds. When it comes time to harvesting, pretty simple here. This is where some nuance may come in though in terms of your market. to leave the tops on or not. With smaller salad-sized radishes, you're probably going to want to leave the tops on. Very few people, if any, are going to do anything with those radish tops. Now, you could cook them and eat them, but most people aren't. They're just going to rip them off and compost them. But having the tops on conveys freshness. Having the tops on conveys a premium product. Even if you go to a grocery store, most of the time you will find radishes that have the tops on. So that's really what people are looking for. If you just sold trimmed off little red and white balls, people will see the radishes. I think they might want them, but there is something that says, how long have these been sitting? What's going on here? The visual cue that consumers get from seeing the greens attached, I think matters. And I've had farmers comment on this channel that it matters in their market. This is something you would want to experiment with if you are a new farmer, because you only want to do work that pays at the end of the day. If it doesn't pay, you don't want to do it. Now, the easiest thing to do with your radishes is to bunch them with the tops on. That's preferable because you don't have to take the extra step of removing the top and then discarding it. So if you can just pull it and bunch it with the top on, that's actually less work than ripping the top off. Now, cleaning could be a potential issue. If you can, as long as you get the radishes good and clean with the tops on, then not a problem. Why might it be a problem if you're not familiar? Well, if you have the greens stuck to the radishes, then you have this little clump, right, of all the radish balls here, the head of the radish. I don't know, what is that called? The tuber? I'm brain farting on that. Then it might be hard to get to some of the inner surfaces of those little radish tubers and get the dirt off. Where if you just have a bunch of balls, you can pour them on a screen and really spray them and roll them around and move them and get everything all nice and clean. When it's bunched in the field, and this is where you would do the bunching, might be a little harder to clean, but I think most people can handle it and it's worth doing. So leave the tops on unless your market absolutely demands that you don't leave the tops on, and they will let you know. And you can also run experiments at the same market. You could have 5 bunches with the tops, 5 bunches without the tops in a bag, because they're going to have to be bagged versus bunched. See what people gravitate towards. If you sell the first 5 that are bunched and nobody looks at the bagged ones, well, then you know that bunching is the winner and that's the direction you want to go in. So think this way, think of doing experiments like this to really hone in on what your customer base wants. There could be differences in customer bases, meaning the retail customer at a farmer's market versus a chef. Chefs may want it prepared slightly different to save them time and their prep in the kitchen. If you have a CSA customer, it's kind of like, who cares? You get what you get. You don't throw a fit. We're giving you this box. If we want to leave the tops on, we will. Washing here, this would be one area that you do want to focus on. Make sure you get the crops nice and clean. Nobody wants to buy dirty produce. While I think a lot of consumers do expect to go home and wash it again themselves, they don't want to feel the need to have to wash it again themselves. So if something looks visibly dirty and there's grit on it or sand and that type of thing, it's going to take away from your product. So spend the time you need getting your product nice and clean, make it as presentable as possible. You've done all the work to get it there. We drove from the opponent's end zone or our end zone all the way down to the opponent's end zone. We're on the 1 yard line. We just need to punch it in for the touchdown. You planted these seeds, you got them there, you harvested them, you're ready to sell them. Make them clean, make them look nice, make them look beautiful. That's the great thing about radishes is they have amazing color and contrast. You have dark green leaves, you have white spots on it, and then you have the dark purples, the dark reds, and various colored black radishes and things that they have. One word on that though, be careful straying too far out into the fringes and getting something too exotic. People tend to buy what they know and they don't necessarily buy what you think might be cool. So you can open Johnny's seed catalog and find black radishes and alternate colors. That doesn't mean that, or while it may be cool to you, I wouldn't necessarily use what you think is cool as a metric of what's going to sell in the market. Most people barely know what a radish is. I don't think that's a stretch. They know what carrots are. They know what tomatoes are. They know what lettuce is. A radish is kind of 50-50. Kids, if you ask them, half will say they know what it is, half will not. So making it even weirder looking and confusing people more visually is not going to work in your favor. Keep that in mind if somebody requests it or a chef or something like that, then you go down that route. But that is radishes. They are a crop that most market gardeners grow. Most market gardeners start there. Now, they aren't a winner in every market, and I get it. I don't eat radishes that much at all. Most of us don't. So if you think about why should I grow them if most people don't eat them, that's a valid question. But they do tend to work for a lot of market farmers. So consider them as an initial crop that you are experimenting with. Don't back the truck up and plan out half your field in it thinking, I'm just going to turn all this cash flow on this really quick crop. Because at the end of the day, you do have to sell them and your market may not want to buy that many, if at all. So radishes, one of the crops to look at when starting a market farm. If you have any questions regarding this crop or any others, leave them in the comments below. If you want to learn more about everything that we do at Modern Grower, check out our store, shop.moderngrower.co. Have a lot of great resources there and tools and seeds to help you be successful on your farm. Thanks for watching this one. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.